Nonviolent Communication, Marshall Rosenberg. Have you ever wondered why so many conversations end in fights, hurt feelings, or simply silence? Today, I want to invite you to a deep listening experience where you will discover how nonviolent communication (NVC), developed by Marshall Rosenberg, can radically transform the way you connect with people and, above all, with yourself. As you listen to this content, you will understand that speaking empathically is not just a technique, but a way of rescuing our most human essence, the one that wants to cooperate, welcome, and be welcomed. Take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you can follow more optimized book summaries that can change your life and help me keep producing this accelerated, accessible knowledge for everyone. Nonviolent communication, or simply NVC, is based on the idea that we are all born with a natural desire to contribute to mutual well-being. But over time, we became disconnected from that capacity, mainly because we learned to express ourselves in a distorted, defensive way, full of judgments and criticism. Marshall Rosenberg realized that language has immense power to bring us closer or push us away, and proposed a radical shift to abandon words that hurt, label, and dehumanize, and, instead, learn to speak and listen with empathy, clarity, and positive intention. It's like reprogramming the way we see others and ourselves. NVC brings four central pillars that serve as a compass: observing without evaluating, expressing genuine feelings, recognizing needs, and making concrete requests. When we manage to apply these steps, we break free from the automatic mode of reacting with anger or blame and start responding consciously and constructively. Think, for example, of those situations where you feel like no one understands you. You speak, the other person reacts, and suddenly it turns into a battlefield. The first component of nonviolent communication guides us to observe without evaluation, meaning describing facts without labeling. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," which is a judgment, we could say, "I notice that when I speak, you look at your phone and do not reply." This simple change already lowers the chance of triggering a defensive or counterattack reaction. The second component of NVC, just as powerful as the first, invites us to express real feelings without shifting the blame. How many times have we said, "You make me angry," as if the other person owned our feeling? Rosenberg shows that we can take ownership of what we feel. I feel frustrated because I need to be heard. It may seem like a small detail, but it completely transforms the dialogue because it assumes responsibility and opens up space for understanding. On this path, we learn to value vulnerability, the courage to show what is going on inside without fear of seeming weak. It is liberating to admit, "I am anxious, I feel hurt," instead of attacking or shutting down, and this connects people in a much more genuine way. Rather than feeding the idea that vulnerability is weakness, we come to see it as the bridge to true empathy. Speaking of empathy, nonviolent communication also warns us about how our language was shaped to create hierarchies, punishments, and controls. We grew up thinking we had to classify everything as right or wrong, good or bad, and this trained us to judge, label, compare, and even blame others for our feelings. This kind of alienated communication blocks compassion, puts us in a fight-or-flight mode, and destroys relationships over time. When we change the way we speak and listen, on the contrary, we plant seeds of understanding, even in moments of conflict. It is here that NVC gives us tools to regain the awareness that we are responsible for what we feel, and that our words can be a channel of transformation, not violence. Imagine how many misunderstandings could be avoided if everyone learned to observe without judging and to express their feelings clearly. Family relationships, professional ones, romantic relationships, all would gain more space for collaboration and healthier agreements. This is the invitation of this book and this script, that you start today to observe in a neutral way and to express what you feel without fear. During the rest of this content, we will dive even deeper into the other pillars of nonviolent communication so that you can immediately apply these ideas and see the difference in your daily life. And if you are enjoying this optimized book summary, I'll remind you once more halfway through the video to subscribe and leave your like, but only once. Deal? That way it won't feel repetitive, but you help me spread this content organically to those who really need to learn about empathetic communication. Now, take a deep breath and reflect. What recent situation could you have transformed just by changing the way you described what happened and how you expressed what you felt? Save that answer, because in the next section, we will move further into the pillars of NVC and understand how our needs shape not only conversations, but our entire way of existing in the world. Optimized insights from this section. Every conversation can be an invitation to empathy. Observing without judging creates room for understanding. Expressing feelings connects. It does not weaken our language, builds or destroys bridges. Being vulnerable is being human. Continuing our transformative listening experience about nonviolent communication. I want you to keep your mind open and your heart willing, because in this part, we will dive into the last two pillars of NVC, understanding why they are crucial for building healthy relationships and environments of trust. Marshall Rosenberg reminds us that beyond observing without judging and expressing feelings clearly, we must learn to identify our needs and transform them into concrete requests. Do you know why? Because when we fail to recognize our needs, we end up turning conversations into demands or emotional blackmail, which generates resentment and pushes people away. On the other hand, when we truly connect to what we need, we can communicate honestly and clearly without hiding or manipulating. The third component of nonviolent communication is precisely recognizing our genuine needs, the ones that are behind our feelings. When we feel anger, frustration, or sadness, behind that there is an unmet need, whether it is for respect, attention, autonomy, or affection. Naming these needs is what gives us back the power to act and seek solutions instead of remaining hostage to resentment or victimization. Marshall explains that most of us did not learn to name our own needs because we were taught to prioritize external rules, please others, and repress our deepest desires. This creates adults who are unable to identify what they truly want and who end up blaming the world for their feelings. That is why NVC returns us to responsibility, reminding us that we can look inward and ask, what am I really needing right now? This simple question transforms the energy of conflict because it focuses on what builds, not on what destroys. From this clarity, we arrive at the fourth component, making concrete requests. How many times have you said something like, I want you to respect me, or I hope you change your attitude, without explaining exactly what that means? Nonviolent communication teaches that vague requests end up sounding like demands and generate resistance. Therefore, when making a request, we need to be specific and achievable, describing actions the other person can actually carry out. For example, instead of saying, respect me, we could ask, I would like you to let me know in advance if you cannot keep a commitment. Notice how much clearer and more practical that sounds. This kind of communication does not leave room for misunderstandings and strengthens the bond of trust. A clear request does not threaten, pressure, or force. It invites cooperation because it also takes the other person's needs into account. But it is not always easy to do this. Our conditioned impulse is to demand, label, and accuse, especially when we feel hurt. The work of NVC is to train us to breathe, pause, and notice before speaking, so we do not let anger or frustration explode into destructive words. This does not mean swallowing our feelings. Quite the opposite. It means expressing them in a conscious, responsible, and mature way. If I feel disrespected, I can communicate that and, at the same time, ask for something that builds, not something that destroys. And this may be the most revolutionary point of Marshall Rosenberg's method. He does not want us to become nice or passive, but to be firm without being aggressive, clear without being authoritarian. Notice how these four components form a virtuous circle. By observing without judging, I understand the fact. By expressing feelings, I show my humanity. By recognizing needs, I connect with the root of the problem. And by making concrete requests, I open doors to real solutions. This flow transforms the conversation from a battlefield into a space for genuine dialogue, even in tense situations. It is as if nonviolent communication were the art of rebuilding bridges, brick by brick, word by word, gesture by gesture. And here's my reminder. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel or left your like, do it now, because this helps a lot to spread high-quality content to those who also want to grow, improve their relationships, and transform how they speak and listen. Returning to our learning, it is worth reinforcing that these 4 steps are not a magic formula that eliminates conflicts forever, but they are tools to deal with them better, with more calm and emotional intelligence. You will still feel anger. You will still have moments of tension, but you will learn to channel this energy in a constructive way. And with repeated practice, this becomes a habit, almost second nature, and starts to inspire others around you. The result is that family, school, corporate, or even political environments can benefit from NVC, creating more horizontal relationships based on dialogue and empathy. Now, I want you to think about a difficult situation you faced in recent days. Try to remember what your real need was at that moment and what you could have requested more clearly. This simple exercise is already a powerful step to apply nonviolent communication today. Optimized insights from this section, naming needs frees us from victimization. Concrete requests avoid empty demands, clarity brings. Cooperation, empathic communication does not mean being passive. Awareness precedes transformation, continuing our experience about nonviolent communication. We will now explore how to practically apply these 4 pillars you have learned to transform complicated conversations into opportunities for true connection. Marshall Rosenberg explains that even when we master the principles of NVC, we will still find challenges in daily life. Because our culture has taught us to react on autopilot, to judge, to label, to defend our point of view without really listening. That is why the author reinforces that constant practice is essential. Nobody becomes an empathy expert overnight. It is a daily training, especially in high-pressure environments like companies, schools, or even within the family. A very important point that NVC highlights is the way of dealing with negative messages. When someone criticizes, accuses, or even insults us, our usual reaction is to defend ourselves or fight back. But Rosenberg proposes that we broaden our awareness to realize that the other's aggressive speech does not cause our feeling. It only triggers it. In other words, the cause of what we feel is within us, linked to our unmet needs. This perspective changes everything because it takes the other person out of the enemy role and gives us back the autonomy to manage our emotions. When someone says something harsh, we can choose 4 paths: absorb the blame and attack ourselves mentally, blame the other person and start a fight, notice our own feelings and needs, or try to hear the feelings and needs of the other person. Behind that message, this 4th path, listening empathically, is usually the hardest, but it is also the most transformative, as it reduces the chance of conflict, escalation, and creates space for real solutions. Practicing empathy at this level does not mean tolerating abuse, but understanding what motivates the other's speech without personalizing so much. This protects our self-esteem and makes it easier to propose better agreements. Rosenberg draws attention to another trap: when the other says no. Our immediate tendency is to feel rejected, but in reality, that no may reflect an important need the person wants to protect. Having empathy for someone else's no keeps us from taking it personally and allows us to negotiate more constructively. The same goes for silence. Many times we interpret silence as disrespect or disinterest, but it can carry fear, insecurity, or even a lack of clarity on how to respond. Having empathy, even for silence, is a superpower that few develop, but nonviolent communication helps. US cultivate. And speaking of empathy, we cannot forget to apply it to ourselves. NVC invites us to look compassionately at our failures, our regrets, and to learn from them without falling into cycles of guilt or shame. Self-empathy means recognizing the need behind a behavior we regret today, so we can choose to act differently. In the future, this frees us from unnecessary internal punishments and builds genuine self-esteem. It is like transforming regret into learning, not self-aggression. By the way, if you have not yet left your like and subscribed, take this moment to do it now. That way you won't miss the next optimized book summaries that will boost your personal and professional growth. And you will also help me reach more people interested in learning deep content in a fast way. Returning nonviolent communication also helps us work on expressing anger. Marshall Rosenberg says there is no problem in feeling anger. It is part of human nature, but we need to understand that it usually arises from thoughts of judgment, and the solution is to reconnect with our needs. The author proposes a 4-step process. Stop and breathe. Identify the thoughts that make us judge. Notice the unmet need behind the anger, and only then express this feeling consciously. In some cases, it may be necessary to use physical force for protection, but never for punishment. This detail is very important because intention determines the impact of the action. If we use force to protect, we ensure safety and respect. If we use it to punish, we generate fear and resentment, breaking genuine communication. In this sense, nonviolent communication is an invitation to take 100% responsibility for what we feel, think, and say, without outsourcing it to others. It is a demanding path, but profoundly liberating because it gives each person back the power to lead their own emotional life. Over time, this impacts not only our individual relationships, but the entire environment around us, creating healthier, more collaborative, and fairer communities. Now I invite you to reflect. What negative message did you receive recently that you could have heard differently? Trying to see the other person's need behind it? This exercise, although difficult, can revolutionize your communication and transform even the most conflict-prone relationships. Optimized insights from this section: negative messages do not determine what we feel. Having empathy for no or for silence strengthens relationships. Self-empathy heals unnecessary guilt. Anger can be expressed consciously using force for protection, not punishment. Preserves dialogue. We are coming to the close of this listening experience about nonviolent communication. And I want you to be fully present right now, because this moment ties together everything we have talked about and brings reflections that can truly transform how you live. Marshall Rosenberg reminds us that anger is not a mistake. It is not something to be suppressed, but rather a sign that there is an unmet need demanding attention. The big challenge is not feeling anger, but learning to express it without attacking, punishing, or poisoning relationships. He teaches that when we stop to breathe, notice our own judgments, and identify the real need behind the anger, we can communicate what we feel consciously and responsibly, without shifting the blame to others. This gives us dignity and clarity while avoiding unnecessary conflicts. NVC also invites us to transform the way we say thanks. You know, those shallow compliments we say automatically. Rosenberg shows that we can thank consciously, revealing exactly which action of the other person contributed to our well-being, which positive feeling was triggered, and which need was met. That way, our gratitude becomes a celebration, strengthening true bonds and making the person feel genuinely seen and valued. Another essential point is self-empathy. Because without welcoming our own mistakes and regrets, it is impossible to offer genuine empathy to others. Self-empathy means allowing ourselves to look inside, understand our limitations, and forgive ourselves, replacing a harsh, punitive inner voice with a voice of learning and responsibility. This does not mean ignoring mistakes, but rather understanding them in order to grow. When we learn to speak kindly to ourselves, we bring that same attitude to the world outside. And little by little, relationships change because we first change. The way we treat ourselves. Nonviolent communication is not just a pretty speaking technique. It is an invitation to live more consciously, understanding that every person carries values, fears, and needs. If we can see that even in tense moments, we break the cycle of hatred, resentment, and shame that harms so many relationships. It is a posture of courage because it demands vulnerability and also protection without violence. And I want you to take from this listening experience the certainty that every word you speak has the power to build bridges or walls. Think about everything that was shared here and start applying it today. Begin observing without judging. Speak about your feelings without accusing. Recognize your needs and turn them into concrete requests. You will be surprised at the doors that open when you communicate empathically and consciously. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this optimized book summary. And if you have not yet subscribed or left your like, this is the moment, because that helps me keep producing deep, practical, and transformative content for your life. Every week, there is more learning to accelerate your personal and professional growth. And to wrap up, I leave you with this reflection. Whenever you face a conflict, silently ask yourself, what does this person need? What do I need? Just that question can change everything.